Father, and Son, and Holy Ghost. Amen. So today is the feast of St. Remigius, but also we're having one of the 30 Masses of the Requiem, the Gregorian Masses, for Father Hector Bolduc, who is a priest, the 5th priest ordained by Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre in 1975, and he was ordained a priest by the Archbishop, or rather in 1974, he was ordained a priest, and he was an older man when he was ordained a priest, so being as most priests in society were very young, he was a very close confidant of Archbishop Lefebvre, who was an American priest, and he was the real founder of a lot of our work in the United States. St. Mary's, Kansas, our largest parish in the world. He bought that and set it up originally with only 1 parishioner, and then it's grown since then from 1 to about 4,000 or 5,000 parishioners now, in a large school and the college and so on. And then he built much of our largest and most successful parishes in the United States. He established them back in the 70s and laid a very solid foundation for the work of the society. And he was a very strong defender of the faith. He died at the age of 74 of cancer on September the 9th. He had filled with cancer, and on the day of his death, he was not able to breathe very well because of lung cancer and being terminally ill for the last couple of years. But on the day of his death, he celebrated 3 Masses. Not able to walk to say his Mass because of breathing problems. They put him in the car, drive him to this chapel. Confessions, Mass, 3-hour drive, Confessions, Mass, and then he died in the night of the cancer. So he died with his boots on, a warrior of Catholic tradition. He was expelled from the society by Father Schmidberger in 1985 because of a misunderstanding, and then he operated independently from the society, but kind of alongside over the last 20 years, or almost 30 years, until his death, and taking care of more than 1,000 faithful throughout the Northeast in America and Wisconsin. And so one of the great warriors of tradition just died a short time ago. And he also was a big supporter of the work of Father Giselle and myself. He got in contact with me after when I went back to America in June, and was a big support and a great advisor, because he knew a lot about the beginnings of our society and how things began, the difficulties you have at the beginning of a foundation. And so he was a very big support and gave a lot of good advice before he died only less than 30 days ago. But in any case, one of the duties of the priests of Father Bolduc, quoting St. Bernard says, a priest is a dog. A priest is a dog. And the duty of a dog is to bark. And St. Bernard says a priest is a dog and he must bark. And if a dog does not bark, a dog is worthless. The dog's job is to warn for the coming of the thief, the coming of the enemies. The dog is supposed to bark. And a priest is a dog whose duty is to bark. And that what happens, St. John Chrysostom tells us, that most priests go to hell. And they go to hell not because of the evil things they do, but because of the good that they don't do. That it is the duty of the priest to warn the flock. And sometimes the priest will not warn the flock because he doesn't want to upset the apple cart, because he doesn't want to offend anyone. And so therefore priests will often be quiet when they are not supposed to be quiet. And then also St. John Chrysostom tells us, as well as St. Augustine, that the priest's duty is to warn against the sins and against the troubles of his flock. And if he warns and the people are bad, then he will not be grave. He will not be punished. But if he doesn't warn, then he shall be punished. And so, when the time of crisis, it is the duty of the priest to bark. The duty of the priest to speak out and to warn the flock. And as Father Giselle was saying to Bishop Tissier a month ago, Bishop Tissier said that you must be quiet. I totally agree with you that there's a crisis in the society, St. Pius X. I totally agree with you that there's liberalism within the head of the society, and this liberalism is spreading. And I agree with you that there is a serious problem. But you must be silent. You must be silent because now is not the time to talk. Wait until the captains decide to talk. Wait until the captains speak out. And Father said, well, if the If the captains and the shepherds are not going to speak, the next line of resistance is the dogs. If the shepherds aren't going to warn against the sheep coming into the wolves coming into the barn, the next line of resistance is the dogs. So the dogs will bark. And so therefore we must bark. If you will not bark, if you will not speak as the shepherd, then we must bark as priests, as dogs. And so that it is necessary to bark. And one of the purposes of our little resistance group is quite simply to bark. To bark against the great danger of faith that is inside of our society of St. Pius X right now. That right now there is a doctrinal slide, a doctrinal weakening happening within the society. When speaking to Father Bolduc about it, who is remembered very well, of course, the history of our society, he says, "I want you to be silent, speak out the louder, cry to the moon, but do not be silent." It's necessary to speak out. We must make sure that there is an awareness of the problem, that there is a doctrinal slide. Speaking with a priest who is a professor at the seminary, and the priest told us, the priest, a professor at the seminary in Australia, told Father Giselle and myself a few weeks ago, he says, "You guys are too black and white. And I'm against Bishop Tissier. Bishop Tissier is too black and white. Bishop Tissier sees things too clearly. When in fact, it is gray. There are so many gray areas. And for you guys, everything is too simple, too black, and too white. And yet when we look at the gospel, it's black and white. The devil is bad and God is good. Truth is what we defend. Error is what we attack. And that which is into me, we vomit out of our mouths. We have only the black and the white. Only the truth and the error. And the reason why there is gray is because gray is a color used by the devil to sneak in the black. So that the people who are trying to stand for the truth won't notice. That's why they like smoke. They like smoke. You know, in the Middle Ages, the Muslims fighting against the Christians, against the Catholics, they realized the best time for them to fight was in a sandstorm. They said, "We like to fight in a sandstorm because the Crusaders are better warriors. But they fight in the light. But we fight in the clouds. We fight in the sand. We fight in the darkness. We fight better in the darkness." The devil fights better in the darkness. The devil fights better in the clouds. And we fight better in the light. And so the first thing we do when we go into a place is we turn on the light. And the devil doesn't want us to turn on the light. He wants things to remain gray. And so what is happening in our society right now is there is a doctrinal slide towards modernism. We are no longer speaking boldly and clearly against the errors of Vatican II. And this has been going on for several years. You look at DC.com, you look at SSPX.org, and the Society Organs of Communication, and they're no longer boldly condemning the error of modernism. They're no longer boldly standing clearly for the truth. They're no longer clearly enunciating our position. If you look at the Society of St. Pius X website, for instance, about the legitimacy of our confessions, it says our confessions and our sacraments are legitimate because of common error. And it doesn't mention anything about necessity or anything about the crisis in the church. And so little by little, the pieces of truth are being removed. We have some truth here, and then the other truth is removed, and a little other truth is removed, so that the gray is replacing what was formerly clear. We're not saying all the lies yet, we're not saying all the errors yet, but there is this grayness. And we're no longer communicating clearly Catholic truth. We are now in doubt as to what the truth is. And what are we doing? We're making a move towards Rome. We're making a move towards Rome. What does this move towards Rome mean? It means we can't condemn the errors boldly anymore. It means everything's going to be okay. We can't boldly condemn the errors. We can't boldly stand for the truth. We have to be balanced. Just asking another priest the other day, you know, Bishop Plaese says that that we could try to understand the Vatican II in the light of tradition. So I asked another priest the other day, just a few days ago, well, what do you say about Vatican II? Can it be understood in the light of tradition? And the other priest said, well, you know, maybe it can. But the answer is no. He was afraid to answer because he didn't want to answer different than the boss, and he wasn't sure what the boss answer is going to be. The answer is very clear. The Vatican II cannot be understood in the light of tradition. Vatican II is contrary to Catholic tradition. Vatican II is the evil council referred to by Our Lady of Fatima, which is causing souls to go to hell. That's the answer. And the new Mass is causing souls to go to hell. That's the answer. And the only answer is pure Catholic doctrine, clear condemnation of the errors, no fooling around, no gray area, no in-between. Clear Catholic doctrine, which we have always preached. And now, not sure. Asking one of our society priests, who's a very strong anti-liberal, just the other day, and he wasn't ready to answer clearly the question because he didn't want to say that you couldn't understand Catholic tradition in the light of Vatican II in the light of tradition. Instead of black and white, we now have gray. The truth is the truth, and the lie is the lie. And when someone is trying to be very indirect, it's often because they're trying to cover a lie. Moving towards Rome will destroy the Catholic faith in our flock. Because modernist Rome is against Jesus Christ. Modernist Rome is promoting another religion than the religion of Jesus Christ. And we have to pray for the conversion of Rome, speak against the errors of Rome, and stand boldly for Catholic truth. And then when Rome converts, when it comes back to Catholic tradition, when it preaches the Catholic faith again, then we follow. Until that day, we must keep a certain distance. Now we're trying to play games. These games are leading to a confusion in the minds of the priests, and not only in the minds of the faithful. Some of our priests are wondering whether it's okay to go to the Indult Mass. Some of them say yes, others say no. We're no longer certain about things we used to be very certain of. It used to be very simple. Indult Mass equals bad. Because it's an approval of the new Mass. Even though they're saying the Latin Mass, it's under the condition of approving the new Mass. Summorum Pontificum Mass is worse. Because Summorum Pontificum is more explicitly clear that you can't have your new old Mass unless you accept the new Mass, and the new Mass is only extraordinary. So it's even more clear that it's bad. And then now, we're not sure anymore. The most simple truths of Catholic tradition, many priests and faithful are no longer certain. And so they are silent. Why are we silent? We should not be silent. At this time, there is a major shift happening within the Society of St. Pius X, the Catholic tradition. And it's not being spoken about. You look back at 1987, 1988. In 1988, when the consecrations happened, Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre told all of us, I was a 17, 18-year-old boy at the time, and I knew what was going on. And we were told that the Catholic tradition is in danger of death. The Catholic faith is in danger of death because there's no Catholic faith without a Catholic Mass. There's no Catholic Mass without a Catholic priest. There's no Catholic priest without being ordained by a Catholic bishop. And the only Catholic bishop ordaining Catholic priests without any compromise is 80-something years old. And according to recent surveys, he is determined to be mortal. And he's going to probably die. And there must be other bishops to continue Catholic tradition. So he decided to consecrate 4 bishops. 4 bishops who were from priests who firmly believe in Catholic tradition, who are going to preserve the Catholic faith. And it was called Operation Survival. Not just the survival of the Society of St. Pius X, the survival of the traditional Catholic Latin Mass of 2,000 years, the survival of the Catholic faith. It is a survival of the whole church that was at stake in 1988, and it was necessary that we consecrate these bishops. And what did Archbishop Lefebvre say at that time? We must consecrate bishops. Even if Rome says no, we must consecrate these bishops. And some of you will not agree. Some of you will say that I shouldn't consecrate these bishops. And if you don't agree, then you go another way. Father Bizek was one of the famous ones that didn't agree. And Father Bizek said in 1988, you can't consecrate those bishops, it's against the law of God, it's against the divine law. If you do that, I'm going to leave the society. If you do that, it's no more. And Father Bizek was the superior of the seminary in Zeitskofen, Germany. Father Bizek was not punished by Archbishop Lefebvre. He was not silenced by Archbishop Lefebvre. He was not expelled by Archbishop Lefebvre. He was not forbidden to celebrate the Mass by Archbishop Lefebvre. Not only that, he was invited to come to the headquarters and participate in the agreement and the deal with Rome. Says, you believe in this deal, come and see for yourself. Come and stand right next to me, said Archbishop Lefebvre, and you talk with Rome. See how these guys are liars and deceivers. See with your own eyes. He didn't believe. And what happened to Father Bizik 5 years later, 6 years later? Boom, he was thrown out by Rome. He was thrown in the streets. He could only learn by his own experience, by being expelled himself as Superior General of the Fraternity of St. Peter. But notice that Archbishop Lefebvre didn't say, I am the Holy Superior General. I know best. He didn't expel those who disagreed with him. He didn't silence those who disagreed with him. He didn't stand upon his own secret documents and his own secret judgment and his own profound greatness. He stood upon a public truth that he explained to everyone. Here's what we're doing. We're going to consecrate these bishops. It is necessary for the preservation of the church. If you think it's a bad idea, if you think it's the wrong thing to do, fine. Here's the reason why I believe it's the right thing to do, because without these bishops, there's no preservation of tradition. Where are the other Catholic bishops of the several thousand bishops in the church? Find me one. Find me one that's saying the Latin Mass only. Find me one that believes in all the 12 articles of the Creed. Find me one that is training Catholic priests. 0 is the total number in 1988. The only one forming Catholic priests, according to the tradition of the Catholic Church down the last 2,000 years, was Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre and the seminaries of the Society of St. Pius X. And this could not continue without bishops. The preservation of the faith was at stake, and here's the reason. I'm going to make a very serious decision. I'm going to consecrate these 4 bishops. You follow, you don't follow. I remember at the time, we used to believe that 1/4 to 1/3 of all members of the society would leave in '88. And we thought that 1/4 to 1/3 of all the priests would leave. And that would be a great loss. But for the preservation of tradition, we had to move forward. In fact, the faithful grew. We didn't shrink. And priests, only a few left. That's what actually happened. But we didn't know that beforehand. And there were no threats, no punishments. Now let's move forward to 2012. Now Bishop Fillet, the new superior of the Society of St. Pius X, the replacement for Father Schmidberger and then Archbishop Lefebvre, he's going to make another shift in the society. This time we're going to shift back towards Rome. We're going to shift back towards the removal of the excommunications. We're going to shift back towards being approved by Rome. We're going to enter into Rome in such a way that will be very similar to the Fraternity of St. Peter, the Good Shepherd Institute, and all the other organizations that have been eaten up, gobbled up, and destroyed by Rome. And we're going to enter into the same kind of category. And he knows that the majority of faithful and the majority of priests on their own will say, no, I don't want that. Everyone else died. I don't want that. Since he knows that, he must move secretly. He must move deceptively. And that's what's happened down the last 12 years. A secret, quiet, subtle turning of the ship. Now it comes into the open in 2012. And they say, okay, we're going to accept the deal with Rome. We may be approved on May 27th. We may be approved on Pentecost Sunday, says Chrstnoel and Father Schmidberger and Father Pfluger back in April. And we wake up and say, what do you mean we're going to be approved on May 27th? What happened? We said there was talks with Rome, nothing going on, that it was a complete failure, the doctrinal discussions were a complete failure, and all of a sudden we're going to have this deal with Rome. What happened? You must have confidence in the Superior General. He's led us well for 18 years. And if you don't have confidence, you'll get to be crushed. You'll get to be silenced. You'll get to be expelled. 10 of us in the process of being expelled right now. And so you'll get to be thrown out. This was the exact opposite behavior. Forget whether it's right or wrong. Just consider the style of behavior. This is the exact opposite way of operating than Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre. In 1988, Archbishop Lefebvre threatened no one, expelled no one, silenced no one. Those who spoke out against the consecrations were able to speak out freely, and they were not punished. He realized he was making a major decision that not everyone could perhaps go along with. And he described, these are the real reasons why I must do it. So likewise, if Bishop Fillet is going to be a true imitator of Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, then he needs to do the same thing. He needs to say, here's the reason why Operation Survival no longer applies. The church is now converting back to God. There are real signs of the true conversion of Rome back to God. Benedict the 16th is becoming holy and pious and traditional. And everything is becoming better. And we need to go back to Rome. And here's the reasons why. And here are the people that can support us. And here's the reason why it's so important. And I understand some of you will be very afraid of this, and you won't like it, and you won't go along with it, fine. But here's the reason why we've got to do it. He doesn't do that. Doesn't do that at all. We get mixed messages. We've got to go with Rome, but then again, we didn't sign a deal. There's got to be a deal, but we didn't sign a deal. We don't know which way is up, which way is down, which way is sideways. We don't know which way we're going. But we do know that those who don't follow the exact program, those who are not in favor of a deal with Rome, those who are not in favor of a modernization of the SSPX, they are going to be silenced and crushed. But those who are in favor, they are not being silenced at all. Now last week, 2 weeks ago, Bishop Fillet gives a conference in Icon in which he is supposed to say that, that I made a mistake. I made a mistake. I trusted Pope Benedict the 16th when I shouldn't have trusted him, because I thought that he wanted a conversion. I thought he wanted to go back towards tradition. Now I realize that I was wrong. But what about those priests who publicly spoke out and said that he was wrong? Doesn't that mean that those priests are now right? Well, it doesn't mean that. Those priests must still be silenced. Those priests must still not speak out. If it's true that there's going to be no deal, then what difference does it make if we continue to speak out against it? It's not going to happen. Why be punished for preaching against it? And yet we are still under orders that we cannot criticize the deal with Rome. The deal that Bishop Fillet himself supposedly criticized 2 weeks ago. Well, then why isn't it okay for us to continue to criticize it? In order that there be no heading in that direction, to warn against this great danger which will gobble up and destroy the flocks. It's already destroying them. You know, in the United States, Ridgefield, Connecticut, we've already lost more than 100, 150 faithful, 200 faithful. Because they have decided, well, since the Indult Mass isn't bad anyway, since the Sower Pontifical Mass isn't bad anyway, we'll just go there for Mass. We've lost 300 faithful in Post Falls, Idaho, one of our largest parishes. Where are they going? They're all going to the Indult. Says, well, if the same as the Indult anyway, why do I go all the way to Immaculate Conception Church when I can go over here to the Indult Mass? The priest is nicer over there. And so they go there. We are losing souls already since 2007 everywhere in the world. Because now it is not clear where we stand. And what are the effects of this unclarity? Loss of souls. Those are the effects. The souls are leaving us now. Overall, throughout the world, in many, many places, our faithful are going away to the Indult Masses. One faithful told me, I've been going to both Masses now for 6 years in America. I go to the Fraternity of St. Peter priest, and then I go to the SSPX priest the next week. And I can't tell the difference. 10 years ago, I used to ask the faithful who left the Fraternity of St. Peter to come to us, why did you come to us? Well, Father, I went to the Indult Mass because I like the Latin Mass. And after a while, Father would say, and God is good, and the devil is going to be a potluck after Mass. The devil is what? There's going to be a potluck after Mass? He would always never finish a condemnation. He would say something good, and then when he was ready for the big punchline, Father would... But when I go to the Society Mass, you would say God is good and the devil is bad, and if you like the devil, you're going to go to hell, you're going to burn, and blah, blah, blah. There was no confusion in the SSPX Mass, but there was confusion in the Fraternity of St. Peter Mass. There was absolute clarity in the SSPX teaching, but there was confusion and lack of clarity in the Novus Ordo teaching, even though they were saying the Latin Mass. I asked every faithful who came over to tradition at that time, why did you come to us and stop going? And they all said in their own way, because of the doctrine. Now in the last 6 years, I do the same survey, asking many faithful. And now instead of coming to us from the Fraternity of St. Peter, they're now going the other way. Especially since 2007. And I asked him again, why is that? He said, well, Father, there's no difference. The Fraternity of St. Peter priest is teaching the same thing you guys are teaching. We're no longer condemning the new Mass like we used to. We're no longer condemning Vatican II like we used to. Now, of course, in the 560 priests in the society, there are still many priests, as in a minority, who are still doing these things. But that minority is getting smaller every day. And they're not in charge. They're not in positions of authority. They're not the movers and shakers of the SSPX. We have to face the fact that there is a corruption within our society. And it must be addressed. When you have a priest who stands up and says we need to mix the two Masses, like Father Cellier in France, is he punished? No. He's praised by the French press, and he is still in great approval by our superiors in Menzingen. A well-known liberal priest who is approved and more approved. But those priests that speak out against liberalism are punished and more punished. We are seeing the same thing that happened in the 1970s. We used to say, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. We have seen this before. This is not something new. We are seeing the same thing that happened in the 1970s happening now in the 2000s. Happened in the 70s in the mainstream church, happening in the 2000s now in the SSPX. Obedience, obedience, obedience. That's what they said back then. Removal of the priests that speak out. Punishment. And then they will tell you, well, you know, there are many points, there are many reasons why this priest had to be punished. You know, it's not just what you think. We can't tell you everything. And yet, consistently, those priests that speak clear doctrine, as we have always preached, are pushed aside. New priests are in place. And what do they talk about? Spiritual, spiritual, spiritual. Beware of this new false spirituality. What they mean by it is, you must be spiritual, which means you must not be doctrinal. You must be pious. But that piety should not be built on doctrine. And so this kind of modern spirituality and modern false piety we cannot have. We are warrior priests. One seminarian told me, two seminarians told me in Winona, they've changed the seminary. He said, you know, Father, in the old days when Bishop Williamson was the rector, they used to produce warrior priests. Priests going out to fight. But now that Father LaRue is the rector, we have spiritual priests. Spiritual priests as opposed to warrior priests. Try to tell St. Bernard that he needed to be more spiritual and less a warrior. Tell St. Francis Xavier or St. Ignatius or any priest who had an ST period in front of his name if he was not a warrior. Our king is a warrior, and our symbol is a sword. A sword that is stuck in the ground, in the rock, and it's not coming out. Because we are always fighting with the sword of the cross. And we're sticking it into the souls that are enemies of God, sticking it into the devils, and we're fighting with that sword, the sword of the cross. We are warriors. Now there's a new spiritual, a soft spiritual, which is to be devoted to the devotional life. But we don't want to be violent. I was talking to one of the parishioners in Post Falls. Used to be one of my parishioners. I said, Father, how are you doing? He said, I'm doing fine, persevering in the battle. He said, Father, why don't you keep persevering, but stop the battle? Keep persevering, but stop the battle. We are at war. St. Paul tells us we are at war against principalities and powers. We wear the armor, the breastplate of justice, the helmet of salvation. What are those things? They're weapons. We carry weapons into battle. And we don't have a false sense of the spiritual. And there's a neo-modernist, quietist, Jansenist spirituality that is spreading throughout the SSPX. And they're saying, pray more, be more spiritual, but don't be extremist. Don't be negative. Be positive. beware of this new shift. It is slowly seeping throughout the whole SSPX. It is not everywhere yet, and there are still many priests who preach as we used to preach, but they are less than before. And unless we speak out against this corruption, it will continue to spread. And if there was no corruption, and if it was just, if the corruption was not there, then we would not be punished. Remember Father Wall telling me in ordinations in America, Father Hugo gave a sermon for which he was being expelled from the society. All he did was say the Cristeros died for Christ and they didn't compromise. And when we compromise, it leads to death. Standard sermon. So obviously he was expelled for it. And Father Wall told me, he says, you know, Father, the hardest thing I had to do during that sermon was what? Stay awake. So why was that? Because I've heard it so many thousands of times that I was like, oh, again? Oh, it's another. But now it became news. Talking to Bishop Tissier at ordinations, also Winona. He gave his sermon against compromise and about the priest being a man of battle. He said, Your Excellency, you gave that sermon 5 years ago, everybody would sleep. And he said, that's true, yes. He was speaking from experience because he has many experiences of people sleeping during his sermons. He says, that's true, yes. But they didn't sleep today, did they? Because it's news. How did the same thing you've been preaching for the last 30 years become news? You haven't changed your preaching, only today it's controversial. Yesterday it was just another boring SSPX sermon. You know, Novus Ordo bad, tradition good, blah, blah, blah. We've heard it thousands of times. And now it's controversial. And he was attacked. That day, Bishop Tissier was attacked by the superiors of the Society of St. Pius X at the seminary and in the United States. They said, you're causing division. And you are being wicked, Bishop Tissier, because you preach that a priest is a man of battle. You know what he read from? It's called the Pontificale Romanum. He read from it. You can't do that. He quoted the Apostle of Charity, St. John the Apostle. You can't do that. And so, what is happening? There is a shift. Preaching the same thing we've always preached now equals punishment. Preaching the same thing we always preach equals controversy. Preaching the same thing we always preach equals extreme. Before it was normal. Now it's extreme. These are all signs that there has been a serious shift which must be addressed. The actual signing the deal with Rome is only the consequences. The consequence of this shift. Not the problem itself, it's the consequence of the shift. Well, in any case, I didn't mean to go on so long in the talk in the sermon here. But there is a true slide. It must be addressed. And Father Boulder, who's priest, saying the Mass for Father Boulder today, he told me, he died September the 9th, but he told me just even a week before he died, or a week and a half or 2 weeks before he died, the last time I spoke with him. Always preach the faith clearly. Keep saying your prayers. Never compromise. And these are the warriors that we stand on the shoulders of, the old priests. We preach as they preached. And as our old priests have preached for the last 2,000 years, we preach as they preach. And we continue what our fathers have begun. And we don't shift. If it means punishment, then fine. Let them punish. But we do not shift. We do not change. We continue to preach the same truth. We continue to condemn the same errors because God is still God today just like He was God yesterday. And the devil is still the devil today just like it was the devil yesterday. And the devil will be the devil forever. And God will be God forever. And therefore we must stand and fight in the same way as we've always fought. And then God will bless us. And if we shift, it will be our doom and undoing. And because of that, God bless you all. In the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen.